Hello, welcome to the Outside Fence, episode number 16, and a massive, massive weekend of racing to go over tonight. I'm your host, as always, Tristan Heffernan. With me is my Melbourne racing expert, Stewart Balls Brown. Balls, Flemington tends to be your go. Was it a happy hunting ground there on Saturday?
It was to a degree. I had a small winning day, but there was a couple of hard luck stories there that I don't really want to relive. But small winning day in the end. So take that every time.
Yeah, I can't repeat what you said when I put young Werder on the rundown. So we're not going to look over that. But suffice to say, it was very unlucky in defeat, and one that you're still happy to follow moving forward. We do have a big announcement coming at the end of the show. We're going to be real annoying and make you watch all the way to the end to see what that is. Hopefully it won't be a letdown, but something new we've got planned here at the Outside Fence. Stay tuned for that. But we're going to dive straight into this Flemington meeting. We're going to look at 3 races on that program here tonight. First of all, Balls, the track there at Flemington. We had a nice dry surface, but we had a lot of wind. How do you think the track played overall?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, we had a nice dry surface. Started off on a good 4. It was upgraded after race 3 to a good 3. As you mentioned, the wind there was a strong northerly wind, which is a headwind around sort of that sweeping home turn from sort of, I suppose, from where they start the 1,400 metre races, but sort of from the 1,000 on the normal track. Around that home turn, it would have had an effect on horses that didn't have cover through that stage of the race. So that was something to deal with on the day. The actual track played perfect, really. It was more there. The wind was the biggest factor as far as sort of where winners come from and sort of what effect it had on leaders.
Okay, beautiful. Dive straight in with that in mind to the Turnbull Stakes, which was a bit of a messy race given a lack of tempo, but really interesting horse, the winner here, Very Elleegant. We've talked about her a little bit on the show, even though she's been racing in Sydney so far this prep. Very good first up on the wet, and then she was beaten last time on the dry, so no surprise that she was a bit easier in the market than she has been so far this prep, but she really showed she is capable here on top of the ground.
Yeah, she did. That was obviously the big query, I think, for a lot of punters going into this race, how she would go back on some firm going. Obviously, she was coming down to Melbourne as well, where she hadn't really, I don't think she'd raced sort of since her 3-year-old days. Actually, she was down there last spring, but sort of that was only for, I think, a run in the Cox Plate. But as you can see, she settled well back in the field there. She's currently 4th last in the red colours. But you'll see sort of during the middle stage of the races, she starts to make a move into the race as the pace sort of really slackened.
Okay, let's talk about the pace here while we've got it stopped. We had a big field, but once again, pretty typical weight for age tempo. Not a lot of speed. Wasn't any obvious speed there on paper. Let's just identify a few horses to watch, and maybe we'll look at which horses are disadvantaged by this sort of slowly run race. You've pointed out Very Elleegant. Let's point out the place getters. Toffee Tongue is back there midfield in those white and red stripes. Finch, where's Finch there? He's
Finch is just ahead of Very Elleegant, sort of green in pink sort of colours. It's wide on the track. You can pick her up, I suppose, during the race. She's sort of, I suppose, the widest runner for a lot of the race. We've also got Master of Wine, who is well fancied into this race, and a horse that I actually backed in the race. It's if you see Toffee Tongues there in the red and white sort of 3-back the fence, it's just behind that, and those blue and yellow Chautauqua colours, we'll call them.
Okay.
And then I suppose,
let's point out Surprise Baby as well, because there's huge raps on this horse for the Melbourne Cup, so he's one that you can sort of keep an eye on. He's back there about second last on the fence. That's him, isn't it?
Yeah, he drew gate 1, and he's pretty much second, third last there on the inside.
All right, let's roll there. I think the fact that Ocean X has rolled to the front could basically tell you all you need to know about the tempo. Not a noted leader. You mentioned you backed Master of Wine in this race. Let's talk about his run, because Subsequent to this, he's got Craig Williams jumping aboard. What did you come away thinking? Obviously a bit disappointed to lose your money. What did you come away thinking going forward here for Master of Wine?
Yeah, I thought he just went okay. Like, there was nothing sort of outstanding about his run. I think we sort of made similar comment after his previous run in the Mackay Diva. He probably settled a couple of pairs further back here than I thought. But he's pretty much got onto the back of Finch and then Very Elegant as they've made their move into the race and got a nice sort of drag into the race. And he's got into clear air at about the 400. And he's more sort of, I suppose, visually ground away, but that sort of slow tempo, he did sort of sprint home fairly hard. He's run the third fastest last 200 of the race, and the 18th fastest of the meeting. So, yeah, once again, the slow tempo was against, but I sort of say he's had pretty much every chance. He's gone okay. Now, the big thing with the Caulfield Cup is it goes up to 2,400, which he sort of looks like he's possibly looking for that distance at the moment. And Craig Williams, as you mentioned, replaces Michael Rodd, who I don't think's really done anything wrong on the horse, but obviously it's a good jockey to have on in a major race. As you can see, he sort of finishes off fairly well there, not to be beaten far in what was a bunch finish.
Extremely bunch finish. Let's touch on that. Do we put that down purely to the slow tempo, or do we look at this form with a bit of concern? We did get a question in on Twitter there from Tas Form Analyst, a very smart, sharp punter who is not a fan of the Turnbull form at all and still thinks that Very Elegant is a wet tracker, even though she was able to win here. I tend to lean with him. I think this is a really big concern for these horses, that they've all finished so close together, and some long shots there have finished quite close up at the business end. And personally, I'm sort of thinking I want to look away from this form when we're talking about the really big races coming up.
Yeah, I tend to agree as well. Obviously, the slow tempo can factor into that bunch finish, given that it's sort of, if it's a bit of a sprint home, it's obviously hard for horses to put big gaps in the other horses. But yeah, sort of Very Elegant winning on dry ground and sort of making that wide run. Like, I think there's sort of plenty of merit in her win. Obviously, if we get a wet Caulfield Cup or a wet Melbourne Cup, I think that's her two aims, then that's going to be, she'll become a winning chance in those races. I think obviously if the tracks stay a bit dry, then she's probably back with the pack a bit with a lot of these horses. But yeah, I do tend to agree. That sort of bunch finish, it's all run of the race sort of stuff. Who can get luck and who doesn't get the luck. It makes it hard to sort of be really confident in any horse coming out of this race and be able to stamp them from a future point of view. But there still were sort of a few good runs in the race.
Speaking of not having a lot of luck, let's talk about Surprise Baby. As you can see there, that he's coming down the outside in those grey with the pink sleeves. He took a fair while to get into clear galloping room, which is not really his go. And now they're talking he's going straight to the Melbourne Cup. What are your thoughts on this run, and what are your thoughts on his Cup chances?
Yeah, I like this run. As you mentioned, he found plenty of traffic. He drew gate one, which was always going to be a big issue for him, considering he's not a horse who's got great gate speed, and he, as you see, he got sort of buried back on the fence. But he didn't really get into the clear until about the 200-metre mark. And then once he was in the clear, actually finished off in the second best last 200 of the race and 16th best of the meeting, which I think is a pretty good sign for a horse that sort of, I suppose, is well known for his exploits at 3,200. As far as coming off just this run, now into a Melbourne Cup, pretty much sort of month between runs into that race, from this stable, I don't have a huge issue with it. He's shown with this horse before he can jump significant distances. Obviously, he went from, I think, a mile race to winning the Bart Cummings last year, and then he didn't run again until the Bart Cummings at 2,500, and then he didn't run again until the Melbourne Cup. So I've got full faith in the stable that they'll have the horse in sort of A1 condition Melbourne Cup day, and I've seen nothing from him in 2 runs back to suggest that he's not a great chance in that race.
Okay, I'm a little bit concerned about him as a betting proposition in the Cup. His racing style is a negative for me. I think he's got such a spruik that he's always going to be really well found. As well as he's going, I don't think he's clearly above some of these other chances. So at this stage, I'm a little bit wary of Surprise Baby, given what price we're probably going to get for him in the Melbourne Cup.
I'm definitely not declaring him or anything.
Yeah.
See, once we get the make-up of the field, then and do a bit of work on the internationals, we'll probably have a better clue then. But it's purely that I couldn't put the pens for him as a Melbourne Cup chance off what he's done. And my opinion, if anything, is probably grown a little bit.
Right. Okay. Cool. We'll touch quickly on another couple. Toffee Tongue. Is she up to a Caulfield Cup?
I would have said before this race, no. It's probably not a horse I could back in a Caulfield Cup anyway, but she's pretty much had every chance here. She settled sort of close-ish to the speed, got inside runs. As we remember, the Turnbull Stakes is not a weight for age race. It's set weights with penalties, so she got in quite light as well, if you're the sort of person who follows your weights. So, yeah, I don't think she's any certainty to even get a run in the Caulfield Cup, but if she does, she's probably not a horse I'd be looking towards, even though she's sort of trained by Waller and does have that on paper, that good lead-up form.
Okay, cool. Finch, he's a horse we're pretty well aware of in terms of Melbourne Cups by this stage of his career. It's hard to make a case for these horses when they've had a go at the Melbourne Cup and come up short, in my opinion. But this seemed a pretty good run. Is it third time the charm this year for Finch?
Yeah, it was probably almost the best run in this race, Finch, given it was wide the whole way and towed a few of the better chances into the race. And as you can see, it's been beaten less than a length. The real issue with Finch is that it can generally put itself in a good position in a race, but it's sort of horse I think that just lacks that sort of turn of foot or that sort of killer punch to really put a race away. It's particularly at this level. So I've got no doubt he'll be thereabouts in a Caulfield and Melbourne Cup. He'll probably look the winner at some stage. He generally maps fairly well. He ticks a fair few boxes, but as far as a winning chance goes, I don't quite have him at the top of the list at this stage.
Okay, and quickly on a few others, there's plenty of these runners who are going to feature in these major races. Warning has run home superbly well there. He's just inside Master of Wine in the finish. But is Warning just a Melbourne Cup or broke prospect for us from a punting perspective? He
could possibly be this prep, given I think a lot of his best form is at Flemington. Obviously, he'll go to the Caulfield Cup next. Caulfield's probably not the best sort of track for him. Both his runs back this prep have been at Flemington. They've both been excellent, sort of over unsuitable distances. He settled well back here, but he's actually run the fastest last 200 of the race and the sixth fastest of the meeting, which is a pretty good effort over 2,000 metres considering the calibre of horse that was racing on the day, but it probably shines some light on sort of the slow tempo of the race. I suppose if I didn't know much about Warning before this prep, I would have seen his two runs this time in and thought this horse is an ideal Caulfield Cup horse, the way he's raced. So I've got to give him some credit there, but I just have a hard time finding him around Caulfield. And then Melbourne Cup is probably going to be a lot stronger race with obviously internationals coming into it. And I'd back a horse like Surprise Baby to beat him at 3,200. But of the local horses, he's probably going as well as any as far as sort of a Melbourne Cup prep goes.
Okay, how about his 4-year-old mate there, Darlasan, who he's a bit hard to tell, but he was right in the finish there in between Finch and Toffee Tongue. Is he more of a Caulfield Cup horse? He does have the ability to put himself into a race a bit more than Warning, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. He's 2,400. He ran second in the South Australian Derby to Russian Camelot at 2,500 last prep. So 2,400 should be okay. It's still a little bit of a query for me. He's a horse that sort of had issues with his manners early days, but he seems to be racing a lot better now. But you're right, he's a horse who can put himself in a position which can be very advantageous around Caulfield, and particularly in a Caulfield Cup. And he's sort of fairly honest type horse. He's probably not, I don't know if he's a winning chance in a Caulfield Cup. He could be if he got the right run, but he's probably more a horse who I'd say could run sort of top 4 or 5, purely because he's going to likely map so well, have a light weight, and he's the sort of horse who'd probably stay out of trouble.
Yeah, he does tick a few boxes there, Darlasan. Probably just the only query is whether he's quite good enough. We're going to talk about one more now before we move away from this race, and this is the famous Bob Peters colours here. You'll see him finishing just in front of Surprise Baby, their number 14. I'm talking about Superstorm, who was unlucky in the Rupert Clark, and you did tell us that you were really looking forward to backing him in a Toorak. I assume you weren't looking forward to backing him in a Toorak with a run up here in 2,000 metres leading into it.
No, I was a bit surprised to see him turn up in this race, to be honest. Given the Toorak looked an unbelievably good race for him, and he probably only had that soft run at 1,400 last start, given how unlucky he was. Here, he's run okay here. He had pretty much every chance. He's followed up the winner for most of the race, and he's finished off okay. But yeah, the placement of this horse is a bit head scratching to me. He might run into Toorak this week, but you've got to put up with that he's ran at 2,000 metres 7 days prior. So whether that's an issue for you or not is, I suppose, something I'm going to have to think about over the next few days.
That was going to be my next question. You're not going to give us an answer, yay or nay, into a Toorak off that lead-up run?
He can still win a Toorak, but it's, I suppose, that being a slow tempo race and a bit of like a sprint home, he shouldn't really have, wouldn't be that hard a run for him. If on the spot, yay or nay, I'd say yay.
Okay. Yeah, he's not going to come dour off that run, is he, with a really strong run in the legs. Okay, quick one. You get one horse to follow out of this race. Who is it?
One horse to follow out of this race. I'll say Surprise Baby into a Melbourne Cup. But if we got a wet Caulfield Cup, I'd happily back Verry Elleegant.
Yeah, okay. I'm with you on Verry Elleegant there, but on the wet ground. Let's move on to... We'll keep talking cups. We'll move on to the Bart Cummings. Interesting horse here who qualified for the Melbourne Cup. Persan, who at the start of this prep was still a maiden. So it's an incredible rise to prominence here for Persan. Let's just pause it here before they start to roll on and talk about the tempo here. What were we dealing with, Walls?
Yeah, so as can be the case in a lot of these Flemington staying races, you'll notice that there's a short, from the 2,500 metre start, there's a short run at the first turn. So a lot of these Flemington staying races, particularly big fields, you get a fairly strong tempo early in the race, as all horses, particularly who go forward, are trying to find their position. But then once they sort of find their position and get down the back straight, the pace can come right out of the races. So that was pretty much what happened here. One thing you will notice, sort of as they get to about 1,000 metre mark, you'll see a few horses, the pace does slacken, you'll see a few horses start to take off and sort of get into the race. But that's sort of pretty much how the race panned out.
All right, I'll let that roll there. We'll talk about this race as the replay goes. A few of them going via the Cape there on the first bend. There was a good charge there. Now, the first thing I noticed here is their old mate Shabao settles well back in the field. And there's been a lot of talk about Willie Pike's rides post this race. What did you think of the ride?
Well, I thought he'd settle closer, but I didn't have a massive issue with him settling that far back, considering the horse was settled and it wasn't pulling. Obviously, we've talked about in previous episodes the issue this horse has had, sort of racing a bit keenly, and it's been to its detriment. But all I was looking for was the horse was in a nice rhythm, not pulling, and had found his spot. I saw a bit of the commentary that people were critical of his ride. I think Willie himself was even critical. But yeah, I thought the horse had every possible chance. He found the back of Steel Prince, who has finished in front of him. He got tagged into the race beautifully. And I thought on the home turn he looked a real winning chance. He's only really whacked away a bit. So I was a tiny bit disappointed with his run. But yeah, wasn't disappointed with the ride.
Okay, you say you followed Steel Prince up. He seemed to do a lot of work here, Steel Prince. What did you make of his run?
Yeah, he was an excellent run. He was pretty much the best run in the race, I think. Obviously, we talked about the wind on the day and the importance of having cover. Steel Prince was... He drew wide and they attempted to go forward, but as we saw there on that out of the straight, a lot of horses had the same idea. So yeah, he was caught wide and got no cover for the whole trip, and he was still right there at the finish. His 3 runs this prep have been excellent. Now, if purely it was an Australian Melbourne Cup, he'd be right into it, right up to his ears. Given the internationals are here, it can make it tough for a horse like Steel Prince, even in these lead-up races. But I think he's going to go to a race like a Geelong Cup or something like that, pending if any internationals turn up there and sort of how strong it is. He'd be a massive chance in a race like that. He's going really well.
Okay, so Still Prince is there in the blue and red with the white sleeves, and he's got Shabao on his back in those red, black and white colours. Anything else we should watch on the run home here, Balls? Obviously the winner Persan's back there on the inside with those fluoro green sleeves. Gets a nice run through. Anything else we should look at before I let the tape run?
Yeah, I suppose another horse you can keep an eye on, Shared Ambition, who started favouring the race. It's actually outside Still Prince at the moment. And it made a bit of a long run from about the 800 around the field, but it sort of looms up at the top of the straight.
Alrighty. One you've found for us a bit. It's a bit more hidden than some of these obvious runs. There's a horse called Admire Robson, who gets to the line really strongly. He's in those Tagaloa colours, isn't he?
Yep.
Yeah. What did you make of his run?
Yeah, he was actually followed the winner in the run, but instead of coming through the inside, decided to try and come a bit wider, and actually found a few traffic problems as he got sort of shuffled back a bit. But he's finished off excellent, the second best sort of last 200 of the race, fairly strong through the line. That was only his second run for Paul Pruska. His first run was a bit similar, actually, at Moonee Valley. He finished off really strongly over the 2040 there. So he's another horse that obviously would be heading towards a Melbourne Cup. He would obviously need to win something to get there now. So you can look out for him, I suppose, in a race here like a Geelong Cup, a Moonee Valley Cup, even the Lexus Last Chance Saloon on Derby Day to try and get in. But yeah, he's a horse who's going well, and I would have thought, he's got improvement in him given he's only second up there and was to the 2500 for the first time.
Yeah, I think he's he may have a little bit more scope coming out of this race. Let's be honest, we're talking second level going towards the Cup out of this race, though, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely. Persan will be making up the numbers in the Melbourne Cup. It's hard to believe he's going to be in the Melbourne Cup, as you say. He was a few months ago. He seems like he's been up forever, but I remember backing him in a maiden at Bendigo. So it's hard to believe he's won a Bart Cummings and he's into a Melbourne Cup. But it shows what great trainers the Mar Eustace combination are, particularly of stayers, and their great ability to keep horses up for long preps as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now, that's not been disparaging to these horses because they're all consistent at their level, but if we're punting on a Melbourne Cup, these aren't the horses we're going to be looking at. So, Lexus, even Shabao that we were on, are you sacking Shabao off this?
I'm not as keen on him as I have been in the past. I was sort of forgiving his last run. I'm not as forgiving on this run. I thought he pretty much had every chance. And if he was as good a horse as I thought he was, he probably should have won the run he had. Yeah,
I tend to agree with. I think we've got to look a little bit off the top line now for some of those stayers. I'm sick of talking about stayers now, Balls. Let's talk about the sprinters. We've got to get our Everest quotes up to fill the quota, but we're going to start off with the Melbourne sprint race here, which was the Gilgai Stakes. This was won by Zoutori again, who won a similar race a few weeks back. I'm sure you found Zoutori again because he's one of your favourites, Balls.
Yeah, I did find Zoutori in this race. I was a bit surprised he sort of got to such a good price. But, a lot of those horses that Zoutori beat last week turned up again in this race. Not last week, a couple of weeks ago, turned up in this race. But I suppose the difference with this race was actually have run at a fairly genuine tempo down the straight here, whereas the race of 2 weeks ago has sort of run at a very slow tempo and very much a sprint home. So there's a bit of a different platform here, but it didn't worry Zoutori, who's sort of a very strong 1,200-metre horse. And I was actually quite impressed with this win, given the fact that he didn't really get any cover down the straight. He sort of had to work himself into the race, and he was just too tough at the end. He's in those predominantly white colours, sort of in the middle of the screen there. The favourite in the race was Tefani, who is directly behind him in the yellow cap with the bluish sort of silks. And then I suppose another couple of notable horses to keep out for behind Tefani in the other yellow cap is Santa Ana Lane, who was first up on the weekend. And then the punter's pal, Kementari, in the Godolphin Blue there, who has every chance. He looks the winner, but then I think he might have seen the winning post and thought, a bit too hard for me. So he ran okay, but he's not really a punting proposition, I don't think.
Yeah, just trying to predict obviously it looked a slow tempo on paper, given that's how they raced a few weeks ago. Now, is it possible to predict maybe dollar for dollar goes along quicker this time, given he was coming back from 1400, or is that just after timing a bit?
No, it's definitely not impossible, because in the lead up to the race, it was either Tony McAvoy or there was someone associated with the horse who did mention sort of that point and how they wanted to, I suppose, make it some kind of test down the straight, knowing they had that platform at 1400. So you could definitely expect that dollar for dollar roll along a bit quicker. As we've seen, though, trainers can say some things in the media, but then they get out onto the track and the complete opposite happens. So you've got to be a bit wary in sort of making that gospel, but it was definitely something you sort of could have kept in mind.
Okay, as we I'll roll the tape here, we did get a question from Tasform analyst. We got a couple from him. This one is about Jamie Carr, who rode Zoutori here, and he asked, is anyone riding better? Thinks all her rides in the big races there on Saturday were perfect, and she seems to have become the first female jock to lose that adjective when being referred to. They just call her a rider now, Jamie Carr. What are your thoughts on Carr as a jockey?
I think you know my thoughts on Jamie Carr as a jockey. I'm a massive fan. Even from her early days in South Australia, I was a big rap for her. And I love putting my money on Jamie Carr. I think she's an outstanding jockey. Horses travel for her unbelievable. And she always seems to have her horses in the right spots as well. We can even look back to Friday night. She rode Sovereign Award at Moonee Valley, and it was one of the better rides you'd see for the weekend. So, if Tasform analyst is seat 1A in the Jamie Carr fan club, I'm there in 1B.
Let's talk about a couple of these horses that are going to the Everest who've been beaten here. First of all, Tafani. You're a big fan of this horse. She obviously didn't have a whole lot of luck there. What do you think her chances are realistically looking towards the Everest?
As you mentioned, she sort of was stuck behind the leading pack there, and I think Ollie expected a gap to come, but it never really did, and it was definitely the hard luck story of the race. Could make a strong argument the horse should have won with a bit of luck. As far as an Everest goes, I actually think the horse has a good chance in Everest, to be honest. It's a sort of horse I would think would probably fly under the radar a bit. It's not like a massive headline horse, but it is a horse that gets better as it gets sort of deeper into its preps. We saw in the autumn how good its form was once it got to Sydney as well. And as we'll speak about a bit later, the Everest sort of opened right up now. And as a sort of double-figure chance in the Everest, I think Tafani's a really good chance.
Cool. And staying on that theme, Sandra and Elaine. Can he improve enough off this effort going to an Everest, or his days at the very top level maybe behind him?
Yeah, he's going to have to improve a lot second up. He tends to from first run to second run, but the stable before this run were pretty bullish about his chances and talking up how sort of he's a bit more forward than he usually is. So he's only just run okay there. Like, he's got a strong tempo to suit. He's set off the back of them and hasn't really made too much inroads into the leaders. I'd be hard to see him improve that much to sort of win an Everest. He's probably not a horse I want to be backing at this stage until sort of he returns to form.
Okay, you touched on the fact that the Everest has opened up. Let's go watch the race that really opened up the Everest. This was the defeat of Nature Strip in Sydney. He jumped to a right Nature Strip. What do you think about the work he had to do to find the front? Is that enough of an excuse to explain his defeat?
Not massively. It was a little bit of a surprise to see Standout sort of so aggressively ridden there, but Nature Strip hasn't had to work too hard to slide up inside him. As you can see, Standout sort of restrained fairly aggressively to allow Nature Strip the front, and he sort of got control there. I suppose the interesting thing as far as the times go with this race, if you want to look back to the TJ Smith in the autumn, which Nature Strip led and won over the same track and distance, he's gone a couple of lengths slower to the 600 in this race than he has in the TJ Smith. Now, see, that's not a huge amount, I suppose. So I don't really think you can blame that he's either gone too fast or too slow or anything like that for the defeat. There was a bit of an issue post-race, which has since come to light. There was a degree of mucus in his trachea, which obviously wouldn't help. So you can, I suppose, somewhat excuse the performance there, but we're going to have to look at all this. He's going to go to an Everest next start, and yeah, you've got to make the decision: do you want to be backing him or not? And I suppose the best part about for a punter is his price has sort of blown out to, I think it's around $6 or $7 now. After I think he was around 6 to 4 not long ago. So you know he's probably going to be the leader in the race, and you're going to get a bit of a premium in his price. And the thing is, his price probably isn't going to shorten too much, because I don't know if he's really a horse that punters are going to, after having sort of 2 defeats now at short price, where a punter's really going to be that attracted to him off this run in an Everest next start.
Yeah, it's going to take some pretty big kahunas to chime in again for a third time with Nature Strip. I'm going to run this now, but I just wanted to point out, Classic Legend is the horse out there, 3 wide in the white and red colours. So he's raced wide throughout here, and then Libertini, the eventual winners, just behind there in a beautiful spot, basically 1-1 in the blue and white colours for Jerry Harvey. Let's talk about Libertini, because she goes straight into Everest Calculations on the back of this, and this was most impressive. Does she deserve to be favourite in an Everest?
No, I don't think so, and I don't think she would be favourite, but she's had the perfect run here. She's had a nice suck in behind them, and then followed up on the back of Classic Legend, who has sat 3 wide, no cover, and sort of worked into the race. And that's her ideal setup. She gets that nice little tag into a race, and then she can explode once she comes off heels there, and a fairly dominant win in the end. But I suppose she's had absolutely every chance there, and so I suppose she was entitled to win. Obviously, she's done well. The 2 main dangers in the race have had genuine excuses. The big thing with Libertini is she's now 5 from 5 on good tracks. So if we get a firm track on Everest Day, you couldn't say she couldn't win, but she's probably not a horse I'd be looking to back in an Everest regardless.
Right, you've poured a nice bit of cold water there on my wrap for Libertini. Interesting point you make there about the surface. So if we get a bit of rain around, you're saying we can pretty much cross her off Everest Day?
Yep.
Beautiful. Now, Classic Legend, this is a horse we've sort of talked about a bit on the show before. He went straight past Nature Strip. Obviously, there was a bit of an issue with Nature Strip, but the way he ran to the lead despite racing wide, even though he was beaten, he looks to be flying, this horse.
Yeah, I think he is, and I think he was probably the best run in the race despite not winning it. As we mentioned, he sat 3 wide, no cover, sort of working into the race. He's gone past Nature Strip fairly easily, and he's only been sort of run over late, and he was entitled to get a bit tired. But yeah, I think that was an excellent run, and I suppose if he can get a bit of a soft run and a bit of luck in Everest, he's going to be a very hard horse to hold out. I think he's probably entitled to be favourite now, off his first up win and then that run there. There's a bit of substance in those 2 efforts. But he's the sort of horse that does need a little bit to go his way as well. So I wouldn't want to pile into short odds, but he hasn't done much wrong in this prep. So for me, yeah, he's a deserving favourite in the Everest.
So he's your top pick. What about outside of him? We're getting pretty close to the big race. Is there anything else that you'd like to throw in that we didn't see there on Saturday?
He'd be my top pick as far as who I think will win the race. Whether I want to back him or not, I'm not sure what price he is, but I'd probably want at least sort of $5 before. I'm
seeing $4.40 favourite over there on Sportsbet at the moment. So
okay, so he's thereabouts, but I'd obviously want to wait for the day and check that he's got a few things in his favour. But yeah, as I mentioned, a couple of horses that sort of interest me, I suppose, at bigger odds in the race are Tefani, who I mentioned earlier, and then also Trekking, who I loved his first up run at Moonee Valley over unsuitable 1,000 metres, and I think he ran well in Everest last year. I think he's just gone under the radar a little bit. He's a horse that seems to keep on getting better, sort of season after season, and he's a horse who beat G-Tra in the Goodwood at 1,200 metres recently in Adelaide, and G-Tra is obviously right at the top of the market for the Everest as well. I think Trekking Tafani and Trekking, both at double figure odds, are both over the odds currently.
Yeah, I'm looking at $15 for both of them, and Guitras there at $5.50, so a good point you make there as well. I'll follow you in. I couldn't tell you what's going to win the Everest. It's not my area of expertise, Sydney, so I'll happily follow you in, especially on those two at double figure odds. I think you're onto something there. That's almost wrapped up the races we're going to look at, but we're going to look at one more for our good mate, the Boogle 79, because he was very taken by a 2-year-old having its first start on the weekend in the Gimcrack Stakes called Enthaar. I think that's its name. I can never work out these names. I've been calling it Ethra and all sorts of stuff, but Enthaar's its name. It was backed as if unbeatable. It ran as if it was unbeatable. He wants to know, he says it's an absolute freak. How have the 2-year-olds that have won so early in the season held up in previous feature races? Now, I remember growing up watching Racing Retro and Richard Friedman on there saying don't take any notice of 2-year-old form before Christmas, but is that still the case these days, Balls?
Well, just to point out Enthaar in this race, she is currently 3 deep on speed there in those green colours. But yeah, as you mentioned, she's very impressive off this one start here, as sort of, I suppose, had no real favours sitting wide. And you'll notice when James McDonald gives her one around the backside with the whip, she takes off nicely. So you couldn't be helped but be impressed. But as far as sort of winners, I suppose, of this race or the Breeders' Plate that was run on the same day for the Colts and Geldings, how they've gone on. This race, I suppose, in the last 20 years hasn't had a real good record, to be honest. A lot of the winners haven't really amounted to much. I suppose not many would have been as impressive as Enthaar, but not many have amounted to much post sort of their 2-year-old season, or even when it gets to the real pointy end of the 2-year-old season around Golden Slipper time. But a race like the Breeders' Plate is littered with winners that have really gone on and been sort of pretty much the premier 2-year-olds of their season. Have even been great stallions, horses like, just in recent time, Capitalist, Vancouver, Piero, Smart Missile, Sebring, Schnitzel, Charge Ford and Schwarzier are all winners of the Breeders' Plate since the turn of the century. So that's a fairly decent strike rate for horses that have won that race and then gone on not only in their racing career but at stud as well. Yeah,
Gay. I remember her declaring Piero in very ungay-like fashion. Said there's your Golden Slipper winner in about October. But you mentioned when McDonald shakes her up there, Enthaar, 100 metres of right, and away she went. Just a most dominant win, and she looks to have a fair bit of strength there. So you can find a good horse, Boogle. We've talked about that before. I think he's on the mark here again. That's going to wrap up our review of racing this week. Our announcement's coming soon, but before that, we just want to have a look at the week ahead, because that might tie into things nicely, actually. We're going back to Caulfield on Saturday, Balls.
Yeah, we are. So back to Caulfield for Guineas Day on Saturday, one of the great race days of the turf each year. The rail's back in the true for the first time since August 29. So the inside will be nice and protected there. The big thing we've got to look out for this week isn't really the wind. It doesn't look too much wind about at this stage, but there's plenty of rain forecast on Wednesday and Thursday this week. So depending on how much that hits, we might be looking at a soft track on Saturday. So we're hoping the weather gods are sort of on our side and there's not too much rain those days and we can get sort of a nice good force surface. But there is some chance we might be on a soft track come Saturday.
Okay, this is the time I'd usually ask you if you've been through the noms and got anything for us and be sorely disappointed. But this week we're going to try something different. We're going to do a preview show for the Caulfield Guineas and the 1,000 Guineas. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
You up for that? Because I'll be leaning on you heavily here for that one. But we'll put that out on Twitter. We're hoping to film that one on Wednesday night, so there's plenty of time for you to watch it before the weekend comes up. So I won't ask for a tip just yet, Balls. I'll say stay tuned, and we'll actually do the form and put out a show for you sometime, hopefully Wednesday night. So stay tuned to Teach Me H Racing there on Twitter. You should be able to find the account Teach Me Horse Racing pretty easily if you've got any ability at all on the search function. So get excited for that. I'm excited for that, and I'll be able to get my bets on before we put it live. But after that, Balls, I'm hoping you come up with the goods this week, and we might make it a regular thing for these major races through the carnival. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching tonight. Give us a like and a subscribe, or leave us a comment. Big thanks to I Am Narnia on YouTube, who was actually requesting a preview show, so he's given us a bit of a kick along there. Thanks for your time, Balls, as always, and I'll speak to you on Wednesday night when we film this preview show.
Thanks, Hef. The pressure's just gone right up.
Yes, I've downplayed that nicely. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you again very soon.